The story begins at a trade union pub, where everyone is having a good time enjoying their drinks. Suddenly, an old man in a black coat walks in and heads straight to the receptionist's counter. He places 4 purple crystals on the table. Recognizing him immediately, the receptionist addresses him as Lord Shen and asks if it's the same as before. The old man, green blood still dripping from his coat, merely turns away and walks to a table in the middle of the pub. Stopping there, he raises his voice and tells the receptionist, "It's the same as always." His loud declaration draws everyone's attention. Upon seeing him, the patrons confirm he is indeed Lord Shen, the man rumored to have emerged from a god-level dungeon. Excited whispers ripple through the crowd. At a nearby table, a newcomer glances at a black-haired man and asks, "What's going on?" The black-haired man points at the purple crystals Lord Shen handed to the receptionist and explains, "Those magic crystals are each worth more than 100 million Moroccan coins." Still puzzled, the newcomer asks what Lord Shen meant by "the same as usual." A woman seated beside them chimes in, "It's normal that you don't know. After all, you just joined the guild." She goes on to explain that Lord Shen donates all his magic crystals, allowing the guild to upgrade equipment and train new members. The black-haired man adds, "Thanks to Lord Shen, our guild is what it is today. For hunters, he's practically a god." While they're talking, the receptionist pours a drink for Lord Shen. As she turns to leave, he suddenly gives her a playful smack on the rear, startling her. Grinning, he comments, "Haha. You're way worse than your grandmother." Outraged and embarrassed, the receptionist hurls the wine bottle at Lord Shen, knocking him to the ground. She shouts, "Old man, are you looking for death?" Standing up, Lord Shen only remarks that her temper is far worse as well. Witnessing this perverted stunt, several onlookers nearly spit out their drinks. They had just been praising him moments ago. The newcomer asks the black-haired man in disbelief, "Are you sure that dirty old man is your god?" Trying to defend Lord Shen, the black-haired man laughs nervously. "Yes, he is. Well," but fails to come up with anything that justifies what everyone has just seen. A moment later, the newcomer pulls out a drawing pad and asks the black-haired man, "Do you remember the time when the Demon Lord and the 7 demon generals were driven back to the other world? Who is that mysterious man who stopped them?" Glancing at the sketches in the newcomer's book, the woman sitting beside them asks if he's drawing a comic, wondering what he's working on. The newcomer laughs and says it's a comic about that mysterious man. He's more interested in him than in Master Shen, but hasn't found any information about the mystery figure. The black-haired man explains that the mysterious man supposedly sacrificed his life to defeat the Demon Lord. Rumor has it he was very young, possibly the first hunter on Earth. After he sealed the Demon Lord in its own world, gates to other realms began opening at various locations, granting humans supernatural powers. While this conversation is taking place, Lord Shen downs his drink in one gulp, places some money on the table, and announces to the receptionist that he's leaving. Surprised, she asks why he's going when he only just arrived. Patting her head, he replies, "I came here especially to see you and to apologize." The receptionist bristles and retorts, "It's too late for that, and, if you touch my butt again, I'll cut off your hand." Lord Shen smiled and reassured her it would never happen again. In a deep voice, he added that he hoped they would meet again someday. Sensing something amiss, the receptionist asked him what he meant, but without answering, Lord Shen turned around and left. All she could do was watch him go, worried and unable to stop him. Without looking back, Lord Shen traveled to the ruins of the destroyed city. Once there, he lit a cigarette and recalled his past, gazing up at the moon that had turned red on that disastrous day. Wearing a haunted expression, he muttered, "This is the end." The cigarette smoke drifted through the devastated streets, a place that had been just an ordinary city 60 years ago. Back in 2023, the Demon Lord and his 7 demon generals tore open time and space, descending upon the human world so suddenly that no one had a chance to react. People scrambled for their lives as buildings collapsed around them, but the demons showed no mercy, slaughtering humans like insects and devouring their flesh. Some of the massive monsters destroyed buildings simply by moving their huge bodies, leaving entire areas in ruins. In the midst of this chaos stood a younger Shen, who would one day be known as Lord Shen. He was holding his dying girlfriend Ying Ying in his arms. A metal rod had pierced her stomach, and all he could do was cry helplessly as she took her final breaths. "Run away," she whispered with her last ounce of strength, and then her hand fell limp to the ground. Overcome with grief and pain at losing her, Shen could only scream and weep. Recalling the past made Lord Shen furious. He tore open space with his bare hands, summoning a purple portal. With lifeless eyes, he stepped into it. This was the last god-level dungeon. Lord Shen believed the rewind stone was inside, and he was determined to retrieve it. Upon entering, he found himself in a flaming city reduced to rubble, with rivers of magma flowing freely. From that molten river, a huge demon with long horns emerged. Laughing, the demon taunted, saying it never expected a human to make it so far. Before it could finish its sentence, however, its upper body exploded into pieces. It hadn't even had time to react. Lord Shen had killed it with a single finger. Apologizing for his haste, Shen admitted he was in a hurry and couldn't let the demon continue talking. He then extracted the demon's core from its body and received a dungeon-clear reward. A red, infinity-shaped stone. Immediately Lord Shen recognized it as the Rewind Stone. He knew of it because, 60 years earlier, after losing his girlfriend, his rage drove him to exterminate all the demons that had attacked. Even so, he found no peace. All his comrades were gone, and he was consumed by despair, questioning what meaning his battle could possibly have if everyone he cared about was gone. During that time of hopelessness, a voice suddenly echoed in his mind, telling him there was still a way. He could seek the Rewind Stone. According to the voice, it was hidden within the body of a monster in a specific god-level dungeon, and possessing it would let him travel back in time. Urging him forward with a final command to go, the voice pushed Shen onto this path of finding and claiming the Rewind Stone. Lord Shen was startled when he heard the mysterious voice and looked around, demanding to know who was speaking. Despite receiving no answer, he chose to believe that voice. From then on, he spent his entire life training, fighting, and relentlessly pursuing the Rewind Stone. Nothing and no one could stop him. He cleared countless dungeons, defeated monstrous creatures, and used every reward to increase his power. Fearing further loss, he always fought alone, never involving anyone else. As the decades passed and he grew older, he became even more powerful. At long last, after 60 years of searching, he finally found the Rewind Stone. Grasping it firmly, he poured his energy into the gem, which began to glow with a brilliant red light. The dazzling radiance filled the entire dungeon, and a blaze of light shone in the sky as though a god were descending. Looking up at it with renewed hope, Lord Shen pleaded, "If that voice spoke the truth, please take me back 60 years. At his words, the Rewind Stone's glow intensified like the sun itself, and then everything went white. When Lord Shen opened his eyes, he discovered he was lying in bed. He glanced around the room at the familiar toys scattered about, and realized that he had truly returned to the year 2023. At 5:37 in the morning. It felt surreal, but seeing the objects of his youth confirmed it was all real. He leapt out of bed and grabbed his phone, dialing a number from memory. With trembling hands, he pressed it to his ear, praying that someone would answer. After 2 rings, a girl's voice came through. "What's going on? It's only after 5 o'clock. The moment he heard Ying Ying's voice, he broke down in tears like a child, overcome with relief that she was alive. Concerned, Ying Ying asked him what was wrong, but all he could manage was to call her name repeatedly between sobs. Half awake and worried, she asked if he had a cold or something else causing his voice to sound so strange. She even teased that maybe he hadn't finished his homework and wanted her to help him cheat. Catching sight of himself in the mirror, Shin realized his body was still that of a 60-year-old man, which explained why his voice sounded off. While still on the phone, he used his reverse magic. Within seconds, his old appearance began to transform, skin smoothing and muscles rejuvenating until he was young again. Choking back tears, Shin told Ying Ying his voice was just hoarse from waking up so early. Sensing something unusual in his tone, she pressed him for an explanation. Now fully restored to his youthful self, and with his voice back to normal, he told Ying Ying that he missed her terribly. It had been 60 years for him, and not a day had passed when he didn't think of her. Laughing nervously, she replied that they had only met that very morning, but she admitted she liked hearing how much he missed her. Feeling embarrassed, Ying Ying said she was still too sleepy and wanted to go back to bed. Shen wouldn't let her end the call, urgently asking her to wait for him. He opened his bedroom door, declaring that he was on his way. Surprised, Ying Ying pointed out that it was the middle of the night and her roommates were all sleeping, but Shen was already outside. He promised not to wake anyone and insisted she wait for him. Before she could protest further, he took off, running toward her dormitory. As he sprinted through the streets, Shen recognized every detail. He remembered that if he kept going straight, he would reach her home. His excitement only grew as he noted each familiar streetlight, each house he passed, the scent of the wind. It was all exactly as it had been in his memories 60 years earlier. Shin was overjoyed to finally be back. The sense of relief he felt, returning to this peaceful time, was immeasurable. After running non-stop, he arrived at his girlfriend's dormitory. Standing below her window, he called her again and told her he was outside. Hearing that, Ying Ying opened her window and looked down, stunned and embarrassed. She asked if he was crazy. Meanwhile, Shen was overwhelmed with happiness at seeing her in front of his own eyes again. He called for her to come down so they could go see the stars. Within minutes, Ying Ying hurried downstairs, demanding to know what on earth he was doing. Instead of answering, Shen pulled her into a tight hug, softly calling her name. Blushing and flustered, she protested that she couldn't breathe, but Shen refused to let go, saying he wanted to hold her a little longer. Understanding how he felt, she agreed to stay that way for a moment. Once he finally calmed down, he looked at Ying Ying, who asked what was wrong. Shen stared at her chest suspiciously and muttered, "This doesn't look like it." Mortified, Ying Ying covered herself and asked where he was looking. Ignoring her question, Shen suddenly grabbed her hand and pulled her close. Ying Ying tried to break free but couldn't. With a serious expression, Shen assured her she didn't need to enlarge her chest. He thought it was just fine as it was. It wasn't. He started to examine her body, commenting that it felt different from what he remembered, as if there were no prosthesis. This offended Ying Ying, who yelled at him in anger and threatened that he must not want his hands anymore, then smacked him on the head. Surprised, Shen thought he must be dreaming. His Ying Ying was usually kind and gentle. How could she be so fierce? Fuming, Ying Ying told him he wasn't dreaming, he was simply out of his mind. She then offered him her hand, reminding him that he'd said he wanted to see the stars. She suggested they go. Shen took her hand, and the two made their way to a nearby park. Once they settled on the ground, Ying Ying admitted she had snuck out and would only stay for a short while. However, instead of looking at the sky, Shen gazed at her, making Ying Ying blush. He hugged her again, telling her he missed her terribly. Blushing even more, Ying Ying reminded him they had just met earlier that day. Shen didn't respond. He simply rested his head on her shoulder, vowing silently that in 3 days he would protect everyone. Afterward, he walked Ying Ying back to her dorm. Then he traveled to the wildwoods at the city's outskirts, aware that in 48 hours the Demon Lord would be born. Hoping his power wouldn't be too diminished by returning to this point in time, Shen gathered his energy and used a skill. Out of nowhere, a powerful bolt of lightning struck him, obliterating the ground, but leaving Shen unharmed. He had briefly reverted to his older self, unleashing just 1% of his power. It was as flawless as ever. He then twisted his fingers and cast a reverse spell, restoring the ground to its original state. Stepping onto the undamaged earth, Shen declared that when the Demon Lord arrived this time, he would make him kneel down and sing the Conquer song. The next day, Shen went to City 10's 3rd middle school, where he and Ying Ying were students. When he entered his classroom and headed to his desk, a red-haired classmate named Huo, who was seated nearby, asked why he hadn't come in with Ying Ying. Hua wondered if Shen had made her angry again. With a calm expression, Shen told Hua, "Women are like that. You never really know what they're thinking." Hearing this, Hua laughed and called Shen's words too philosophical. He then teased Shen, saying he looked unusually mature, and asking whether he and Ying Ying had applauded for love the previous night. He'd heard from Ying Ying's roommate that she ran out in the middle of the night. Shen couldn't think of a response. Seeing him at a loss for words, Huo grew even more excited. "Shen, you look like a little old man right now," he said. "I bet all you two did was hold hands." What a shame. Shen realized he currently appeared no different from a typical teenager, which made his earlier remarks seem inconsistent. He chuckled and told Huo, "I'm taking it one step at a time. I'll get there eventually." Shen hoped that was enough to appear normal, but Huo wasn't done. Looking Shen over carefully, he commented that he seemed off today, remarking that Shen usually never talked about studies of life or whatever he was going on about. Nervous that his behavior was drawing suspicion, Shen wondered if he'd already made a mistake. Huo pressed him further, joking, "Come on, be straight with me. Are you acting so weird because you wore yourself out last night?" Hearing this, Shen realized this was just the kind of banter he'd forgotten about. Everyone really had been so young and carefree back then. He laughed and denied it, explaining he and Ying Ying had only chatted a bit. Opening his textbook, he assured Hua that he and Ying Ying had a perfectly innocent relationship. Annoyed, he told Hua to quit spouting nonsense, since class was about to start. Privately, Shen realized he'd need to be careful about how he acted if he wanted to keep up his young appearance. Still, Hua didn't let up. He reminded Shen that the school's spring outing would be the day after tomorrow, and they'd have to spend a night outdoors. "You know what that means, right? If you miss this chance, your odds will only get worse," Hua teased. Shen's expression changed the moment he heard spring outing. He remembered all too well that in his previous life, Hua had died on that trip. A plant-like demon attacked their bus. Shen and Ying Ying had managed to escape, but Hua was injured and couldn't run. He'd called out for Shen to help him, but before Shen could do anything, the demon pierced Hua's heart and killed him. Right in front of Shen's eyes, it then lifted Hua's body into the air and devoured him. Now Shen worried over what to do. He knew he couldn't warn everyone publicly. First, no one would likely believe him, and second, causing a panic might lead to even worse outcomes. As Shen was lost in thought, Huo suddenly called his name, asking why he was staring at him. With a smirk, Huo pointed to Shen's book and noted that it was upside down. Blushing, Shen quickly flipped it the right way and murmured that he really did need to study, as he had important plans the day after tomorrow. He added that once he was finished, the two of them could hang out sometime. While they were talking, Ying entered the classroom. She didn't even glance at Shen as she passed, prompting Hua to tease him again. Ying's here and she's not even looking at you. Before Shen could respond, Ying walked right up to him and called him a pervert. Shen immediately remembered what he had done to Ying the previous night. He'd been so excited that he lost control for a moment. Feeling both remorseful and embarrassed, he watched as Ying pulled out a lunchbox and handed it to him. She explained that his parents had called, saying they would return next Tuesday. Worried he might be living on instant noodles, they'd asked Ying to bring him some homemade food for the next few days. Blushing, she added, "Don't get the wrong idea. I just don't want your uncle and aunt to worry. It's not because of you." Sensing she was still annoyed, Shen gratefully accepted the lunchbox and assured her he understood. Hua, standing nearby, clapped his hands and teased Ying, saying, "If you marry Shen in the future, you'll definitely make a wonderful wife and mother." Ying grew even more flustered. "I'm not marrying that pervert," she retorted. Then she turned away abruptly, mumbling something about class starting soon and telling them to take care of themselves. After she left, Huo looked at Shen and remarked, "Looks like you really pissed her off this time. You two argue so much. When you finally get married, you'll probably drive each other crazy." Shen smirked. "Are you jealous? I'll help you find your dream girl in this life if you want." Huo immediately declined, insisting he liked his single, carefree life. Suddenly the bell rang, and a teacher entered the classroom. He pointed to the blackboard and said, "This topic hasn't been tested in the last 3 years, so it'll definitely appear on this year's exam." While the teacher spoke, Shin gazed out the window, still finding it hard to believe he had actually spent 60 years alone before returning to this peaceful time. Just then, an explosion rocked the city. Shocked, Shen and the other students heard multiple blasts, one after another, each eruption more powerful than the last. Someone in the class noted that the explosions seemed to be coming from Dongcheng City. Leaping up from his seat, Shen's mind raced. Could it be the Demon Lord already? He quickly dismissed the idea, because he remembered the Demon Lord wouldn't appear for another couple of days. It must be some other threat, he told himself. Looking at Ying and Hua, Shen realized he had to ensure their safety, so he bolted out of the classroom. Ying caught a glimpse of him rushing into the hallway and called after him, but he didn't stop. He sprinted up the stairs to the rooftop, where he used his reverse magic to revert to his 60-year-old form, making himself unrecognizable. Then, with powerful leaps, he bounded from one building to the next, heading straight for the source of the explosions. When Shen arrived, he was shocked to discover a massive portal had opened in the middle of the city. Huge monsters were pouring out of it and attacking everything in sight. "Why are they here so early?" Shen muttered to himself, incredulous. He had been certain this wasn't supposed to happen yet. Demonic monsters rampaged through the city, devouring everything in their path. From above, Shen watched in confusion, unable to comprehend how their arrival had come so early. Among them were various Jurassic-like creatures slaughtering humans, a swift bird-like monster swooping down on fleeing civilians, and a fire-breathing dragon incinerating buildings with its flames. Their roars and the citizens' terrified screams filled the air. Although Shen was infuriated by this premature invasion, he was no longer the same young man from 60 years ago who had been powerless to protect anyone. Now known as the Killer Star, destined to destroy evil, he would not back down. The monsters continued assaulting the city, also standing guard at the portal they had emerged from. Shen focused on that portal and shouted for the evil star to come out. Hearing Shen's voice, someone stirred within the portal. Suddenly, its size expanded, and a dark figure came into view. Emerging on a demonic steed, the Demon King, known as the Evil Star, stepped forth and remarked in surprise that someone on this world knew his title. He demanded to know Shen's identity. Shen simply yelled back, "I'm your grandpa." Finding Shen dull, the Demon King began casting a powerful spell meant to annihilate Shen in one blow. A massive energy beam engulfed the sky and struck Shen. However, when the attack cleared, the Demon King was stunned to see Shen standing without a single scratch. In an instant, Shen flashed before the Demon King and, without giving him him time to react, delivered a devastating punch that sent the Demon King hurtling back into the portal. The impact was so forceful it shattered the ground and drew purple blood from the Demon King's mouth, the first time he had ever bled. Shen then summoned 2 spiritual hands with his aura, telling the Demon King to remain in darkness forever. With all his might, Shen began to twist and collapse the dimensional portal from which the Demon King had emerged. Astounded by Shen's ability to seal the void gate with his bare hands, the Demon King stood there, bleeding and smiling grimly, recognizing Shen as a worthy opponent on Earth. Mustering his full power, Shen forced the portal to shrink until it was finally shut. The rift in space was destroyed, and Shen stared in surprise, yet relieved, that his technique had worked. Before he could celebrate, an explosion on the ground reminded him there were still countless monsters terrorizing the city. Immediately, Shen accelerated toward them, his speed almost impossible to track. One punch was enough to kill any monster, and a single swipe of his hand sliced the demonic beasts clean in half. While Shen dealt with the creatures, humans who had remained in the city filmed him using their phones and cameras. They captured clear images of Shen in his older form. The following day, Shen's parents called after hearing the news of the monster attack. They told him they would be home the next day and urged him to lock his doors and windows at night. Shen assured them he understood and promised to be careful. After hanging up with his parents, Shen lay down on the sofa, thinking that although the evil star had appeared earlier than expected, it was neutralized without any dire consequences. His parents, Ying, and everyone around him were safe, and he could finally enjoy his real 15th birthday. Moreover, because of the previous day's incident, the school had granted 3 days off, a perfect opportunity for Shen to organize his thoughts. He glanced at the Galaxy Demon Cube. Thanks to it, the Rewind Stone hadn't stripped him of his powers or taken away any of his possessions. His abilities would only vanish when he reverted to his younger form. Am I really the only person in the world with supernatural powers right now? He wondered, feeling a rush of excitement. Shen blushed as he imagined all the mischievous things he could do. Activating the Galaxy Demon Cube, he checked his inventory. To his surprise, it was overflowing with rewards from the last God-level dungeon. Still, they were currently useless. He had far more coins than he could ever spend. Resolving to keep them as mementos, he was lost in thought when the doorbell suddenly rang. He called out that he was on his way, opened the door, and found Huo standing outside. The moment Huo stepped in, he told Shen to turn on his computer immediately. Taken aback, Shen asked what was going on. While heading to Shen's computer, Huo complained that Shen was never online whenever big events happened. Opening a news site, Huo pointed excitedly at a photo and asked, "Isn't this old man incredible? I never thought I'd see something like this outside of my dreams." One glance at the screen, and Shen was stunned. A photo and video of his older self battling monsters were all over the internet, under the headline, "Mysterious Old Man Fights Aliens." Shen clutched his head in dismay. He hadn't expected to be caught on camera. Beside him, Huo bubbled over with excitement, saying that aliens had invaded Earth and that a single old man had driven them away. Everyone online was looking for him. Huo added that, if he hadn't seen it for himself, he would have assumed it was just a movie shoot. But apparently, superpowers really existed. Trying to act clueless about these so-called aliens, Shen claimed he hadn't seen anything that day and assumed it was just a gas pipeline explosion. Grabbing Shen by the shoulders, Hua shook him and exclaimed, "Don't you get what this means? There must be other people with superpowers out there, and that means we have the potential to develop powers too." Huo pressed on. "Usually you're so into paranormal stuff, why are you so calm?" Feeling nervous, Shen explained that he was simply in shock and hadn't fully processed it yet. Then, Huo asked what kind of superpower Shen would want if he could choose. Smiling, Shen said he didn't think such a thing could actually happen. Huo refused to accept that. He pointed out that they had already seen the old man in action, proving superpowers were real, and insisted that the aliens would likely return. He was so excited imagining the possibilities that Shen had to tell him to wipe the drool from his mouth. Turning red, Huo admitted that if he could choose, he'd want the ability to stop time. Immediately, Shen understood his friend's not-so-pure motives and felt disappointed. Trying to justify himself, Huo insisted that if he had that power, he would use it to help Shen and Ying realize their dreams. He declared that their brotherhood meant so much to him that he'd risk his life for Shen. Chuckling, Shen replied that it wasn't necessary. He preferred things to develop gradually and naturally. Still energized, Huo told him to just wait for the upcoming spring outing next Friday. He promised to help Shen get closer to Ying. When Shen heard Huo mention the spring outing again, he recalled everything that had happened in his previous life. how Huo and the others lost their lives, but he immediately pushed those thoughts aside, reassuring himself that such a tragedy wouldn't happen again. Patting Huo's shoulder, Shen told him not to interfere, joking that he didn't want Yang Ying to beat him to death. Finally, Friday arrived, the day of the spring outing. Shen's entire class traveled by school bus to a mountain resort. As soon as the students stepped off the bus, their homeroom teacher asked them to please check in first, then enjoy free time for the rest of the day. He reminded them to gather in the main hall at 8:30 the next morning for group activities. The students agreed and headed toward the resort, which was quite large and featured a stunning mountain backdrop. Each room would be shared by 2 students, so Shen was paired with Huao. While walking to their room, Huao noted that Ying Ying hadn't paid much attention to Shen lately. He guessed she was still mad about whatever happened before. If you'd actually made it up to her, Huao teased, she wouldn't be upset for so long. Annoyed, Shen told him to stop meddling in young people's business and let them resolve things on their own. Then he opened the door. Huao immediately flopped onto the bed and smirked, telling Shen, "I know exactly what you're hiding under your mattress. No need to hide it from me. We're both guys here." He called Shen a man of great knowledge compared to himself, who he claimed was just a younger brother. Confused at first, Shen tried to remember what was beneath his mattress. Suddenly it hit him. He had stashed some naughty magazines there. Shocked, he wondered, "Wasn't I supposed to be the serious type when I was young?" Huo told Shen he should enjoy life now, while he's still young, because once they start working, everyone from their class would basically become office drones. They'd be so exhausted every day that even their 6 senses would feel purified, leaving them with no energy or desire for anything else. Meanwhile, Shen took some tea leaves out of his bag and asked Huo, "Why think so far ahead? We're lucky just to be alive and grow up healthy." He filled a kettle from the tap, boiled the water, brewed some tea, then sat down and suggested they invite Ying Ying to climb the mountain later, since it's good for cardio and lung function. Huo stared at him. "Something is definitely off," he said. Perplexed, Shen asked, "What do you mean?" Huo explained that Shen had been acting like an old man lately. His mannerisms and speech sounded quite similar to the internet's superpowered old man. Alarmed, Shen worried Huo might have discovered his secret identity. Continuing, Huo pointed out that not only did Shen speak in an old-fashioned way, but his entire demeanor was more like a grandfather's. He was convinced something must have happened between Shen and Ying Ying that night. Huo guessed that things hadn't gone well, that maybe Shen's little brother couldn't rise to the occasion, and Ying Ying was angry about it, causing Shen to act like an old man. Shen just laughed and told him he was simply practicing to become a good office worker in the future. Paying attention to health from a young age would give him the energy to handle any job, whether 9 to 6 or 10 to 10. He assured Huo that his little brother was as strong as ever. Still suspicious, Huo rummaged through his bag and pulled out a small bottle. Grinning, he offered it to Shen, suggesting he add 2 slices of American ginseng to revitalize his body, just in case your little brother still needs a boost. Shen was startled by what Huo was carrying in his bag, but before he could say anything, they heard a knock at the door. It was Ying Ying, asking if they were all packed and ready to go. Hearing her voice, Huo teased Shen, quipping that Ying Ying had come over in person. When Huo opened the door, he found her dressed in hiking attire, urging both of them to join her instead of staying holed up in their room. "You two must be thinking alike, like a married couple," Huo joked. Ying Ying shot him an angry glare and asked if he wanted to die. Alarmed, Huo tried to smooth things over, but she just told him to zip it. Just then Shen walked over, saying he could leave any time. At the sight of him, Ying Ying blushed, remembering Huo's comment from moments before. Shen also blushed when he noticed her short hiking skirt. Seeing Shen's expression, Ying Ying asked, "What's with that look in your eyes? Why are you staring at me like that?" Overcome by Ying Ying's beauty, Shen couldn't control himself. He crouched down to peer beneath her skirt, muttering something about verifying a suspicion. Then he said, "I guessed wrong. Girls these days are so much bolder than back then." Mortified and furious, Ying Ying demanded to know what he meant. Completely red-faced, she slapped him and shouted, "Pervert, go to hell!" As the sting of the slap sank in, Shen realized his hands had moved on impulse at the sight of her short skirt. Angry and embarrassed, Ying Ying stomped off. Huo, who had watched the whole thing, gave Shen a thumbs up and said there was no point pretending to be upright and serious when he was clearly following his impulses. Shen rubbed his stinging cheek, realizing that he had indeed been a bit of a pervert in his youth. They hurried after Ying Ying, who was already starting up the nearby mountain. Along the way, Shen asked Hua if girls their age stayed mad for long. Hua shrugged, noting that Shen had been going out with Ying for a while, and this was just how things went. Shen sighed, feeling old and unsure how to handle these younger issues. Briefly, his mind wandered to the glimpses he'd caught under Ying's skirt, and to memories of the bold female warriors and other companions he'd once fought alongside. He even started drooling at the thought, which Huo immediately noticed, warning him to focus on cheering Ying up. She was so upset, he didn't dare say anything to her himself. Determined, Shen called out to Ying, asking her to wait and let him explain. Instead, she ran faster, telling him she didn't want to hear a word. Then she tripped over a rock and began to fall. In a flash, Shen leapt forward, crossing the distance in the blink of an eye to catch her in his arms. Hua watched in disbelief, muttering that Shen must have superhuman speed. Meanwhile, Shen's face was suddenly very close to Ying's, and he asked softly if she was all right, pointing behind him to confirm that he really had jumped that far. Shen helped Ying to her feet, and she thanked him for his quick save. Huo joked that Shen was wasting his talent by not competing in the Olympic long jump, marveling at how impressive his leap had been. When Huo asked how he did it, Shen lied guiltily and said he wasn't sure. He must have suddenly tapped into some hidden human potential. In that moment, Ying caught sight of something and called them over to the edge of the forest. Pointing ahead, she asked what it was. Looking where she indicated, Shen and Hua saw a huge dungeon portal. Shen was shocked. He couldn't understand how a portal could appear here, especially since he'd driven the demons back to their world. He had fully expected the threat to be gone. He then remembered an ancient tale from before his time reversal. According to legend, the very first hunter was a mysterious young man who had sealed the demon lord in its own dimension. After that, gateways to other worlds began appearing in various places, and humans started acquiring supernatural powers. Could Shen be that young man? And if so, did this mean it wasn't truly over? Shen rubbed his head, trying to deny the reality before him. It's impossible, he muttered. The legend talks about a young man, not... Before he could finish, Ying noticed his distress and asked what was wrong. Shen realized that if a dungeon portal was right there, history might be repeating itself. Even if he kept quiet, society would soon change again. But he also knew he couldn't reveal this yet. While Shen was lost in thought, Huo approached the portal, remarking that it might be some gateway to an alien world. That comment frightened Ying. Immediately, Shen told them both to go inform a teacher while he stayed to keep watch, silently planning to explore the dungeon himself. Worried, Ying asked if he would be okay. Shen reassured her that he could run faster than anyone if anything went wrong, and that, in any case, they were just kids. This situation was beyond them. Huo urged Ying to come with him to find a teacher, promising they'd return quickly, so leaving Shen alone for a bit wouldn't be a big deal. Before departing, Ying anxiously told Shen to be careful and keep an eye on things. He laughed and told her not to worry. Nothing was going to happen, and maybe they'd even stumbled upon a fantastic treasure. After Huo and Ying left to find help, Shen walked up to the portal entrance. Gathering lightning energy into his hands, he released it skyward, and a massive bolt crashed down beside the dungeon. When the lightning subsided, Shen stood there in his older form, calmly smoking a cigarette. Without a moment's hesitation, he stepped through the dungeon's entrance to see what lay inside. With the emergence of that first dungeon, the entire world changed. Dungeon portals began appearing everywhere, resetting and refreshing at fixed intervals. The energy harvested from these dungeons gradually replaced traditional energy sources, leading to sweeping societal changes. 5 years have passed since the appearance of the first dungeon, and Shen, now known publicly as Lord S, has become the world's first and most powerful hunter. Today is the entrance exam for a prestigious academy, and many people have gathered to participate. Among them are Shen and his girlfriend Ying. She's an avid fan of Lord S and desperately wants to enroll in the academy so she can meet him during the opening ceremony. Ironically, Lord S is none other than Shen, who's standing right beside her, but she remains completely unaware of this. She's so close, yet so far from meeting her hero. In the 5 years since he sealed away the Demon Lord, Lord S founded the first specialized school and guild for supernatural abilities, nurturing countless new awakeners and hunters. Thrilled at the chance to be at the same institution as her idol, Ying hugs Shen in excitement, asking him if she should repeat Lord S's story for the umpteenth time. Noticing her growing obsession, Shen gently pushes her back, saying his ears have already developed calluses from hearing about Lord S so often. The reason Ying Ying is so infatuated with Lord S is because in the early days, Shen had to work closely with the media to rapidly establish the school and guild. Though it had its benefits, the biggest downside was his forced idol status. He couldn't move about freely without attracting attention. Seeing that Shen won't let her continue gushing about Lord S, Ying Ying gets annoyed and tells him that if he even had 1% of Lord S's skill, she wouldn't have to worry about him so much. Sighing, she laments that Lord S hasn't appeared in public for a while, so he must be incredibly busy. Shen, not wanting her to discover his secret, makes an excuse that he really doesn't want to apply to the academy. He tells her to just let him go to a regular university because his awakened ability doesn't even register on normal assessments. He's certain to fail the entrance exam, so why bother wasting their time? Hearing this, Ying Ying grows even more frustrated, insisting his ability is unique. She believes if he properly explains it to the examiners, they'll see its value. Still reluctant, Shen pretends he has social anxiety, but Ying Ying ignores him, grabbing his collar and insisting she'll explain things for him if necessary. Dragging him to the exam venue, she reminds him that his parents are counting on him to get into the academy and that this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He can't just let down their ancestors. Protesting, Shen grumbles he doesn't even remember his great-grandfather's name, so there's nothing to feel guilty about. Yet Ying Ying refuses to relent and hauls him inside. In truth, Shen is exhausted from living two lives, one as an ordinary student and the other as the famed Lord S. He's on the brink of burnout and has often thought about just telling Ying Ying everything, but seeing how unwilling he is, Ying Ying makes him an offer. She whispers something into his ear, so embarrassing and adult in nature that the writer won't specify it, causing Shen's face to turn bright red. Turning away, Ying Ying asks him if he'll take the exam now. With a new, rather personal motivation, Shen excitedly declares there's no problem, he'll do it. That night, Shen and Ying Ying returned home. After taking a shower, Ying Ying, now 20 years old and an awakened trapper, came over to Shen wearing only a towel. The world had changed dramatically over the last 5 years, and she had changed along with it, evolving from an innocent girl into a mature woman. Sitting down beside Shen, she asked him to turn on the air conditioner because it was too hot. Feeling embarrassed, Shen tried to avert his gaze, reminding her that he was a man too. Ying Ying leaned in closer, stating that she already knew that. She just wanted to know if he'd found the AC remote. Shen blushed at her proximity. For anyone wondering why they were living together, the reason was simple. Shen's parents went on a world tour, telling him Ying Ying would look after him in their absence. He hadn't even had a chance to protest before they departed in a hurry. The next day, Shen and Ying Ying went back to the awakened examination venue to register. A strikingly attractive receptionist asked them to fill in their details on a touchscreen. Once they submitted the tablet, she informed them that the entrance exam would be in 2 months and that they'd receive an email with further instructions. She then produced a miniature doll of Lord S. Shen's public identity and gave one to each of them as exclusive registration merchandise, wishing them luck on the exams. Seeing his own figurine, Shen grew worried, muttering to himself about whose idea this was and promising to dock someone's salary. Meanwhile, Ying Ying was overjoyed and even kissed the doll. Shen felt oddly jealous, thinking that despite the doll being based on him, it felt like he was being cheated on. The following day, at the Guild United building, where hunters gathered to receive assignments, a woman named Funing entered a room on the top floor carrying a stack of papers. She placed them on a table and addressed Lord S., who was none other than Shen. She told him that this was the dungeon evaluation data from the European guilds and asked him to handle it within 3 days. She also reported that a new A-rank dungeon portal had opened in Area A, and both the government and the guild were awaiting his decision on how to proceed. Completely exhausted, Shen told Funing he felt drained. As the guild's administrative officer and his senior secretary, Funing had an awakened ability called Enhanced Cognition. With a small laugh, she placed a box of herbal tonic on the table and offered it to him. Though Funing was strict and kept Shen busy all day, his responsibilities with her were nothing compared to dealing with Ying Ying's boundless energy at home. Feeling demotivated, Shen lamented that he was getting old. Funing teased that if Shen doubled her salary, she'd handle all these documents for him. Smiling, she asked what he thought. Shen was shocked. He remembered that her current monthly salary was already 100,000 mole coins, and she got raises nearly every month. He accused her of using her ability only to squeeze money out of him, but Funing persisted with her request. She warned that if he didn't give her the raise, it would take him exactly 17 days, 5 hours, and 37 minutes to finish the work on his own. With no other option, Shen finally agreed to raise her salary yet again. Funing wore a smug expression at his decision. Funing then removed her glasses and opened her eyes, activating her ability. The stack of paperwork Lord S needed to handle floated into the air, and within a minute she had finished it all. Placing her glasses back on, she remarked that cognitive enhancement was indeed a very useful ability. She reminded Lord S not to forget her salary increase. Amazed by her skill, Lord S asked her to also draft the necessary report and follow up on any pending tasks. He thought he should find a way to replicate her ability one day. She was costing him a fortune. Funing smiled and said, "Of course, it's my duty." She added there was another important matter. At the end of next month, on the 31st, Lord S needed to attend the Academy entrance exam event. She would prepare his speech 3 days in advance and send it to him. She pleaded with him not to be late again, because last year he'd arrived half an hour late, and she had had to explain for ages to the media. With his rising status, she said, he needed to mind his words and actions. He was the idol of the new world, after all. Annoyed, Lord S told her he understood and asked her to stop nagging. She was too young for that. He said he had some personal errands to handle and asked her to leave. Funing agreed, but reminded him to finish the remaining paperwork first. The moment she stepped out, Lord S answered a video call from Ying Ying, who had been calling him non-stop for the past few minutes. Ying Ying, cooking in the kitchen, immediately demanded to know why he'd taken so long to pick up. Having reverted to his younger form, Shen told her he was in an immersive escape room game with friends and couldn't talk on the phone. Ying Ying reluctantly accepted the excuse, then noticed Shen's outfit looked too large for him. She told him to pick something more in character and asked him to bring the 2-door lock she'd requested, and to hurry home when he finished, because they'd be having hot pot that night. Shen agreed and ended the call. Feeling frustrated with his double life, Shen murmured that he needed to find a way to tell her the truth. The age gap was starting to bother him, and it hurt his pride to be bossed around by a younger girl. Yet it wasn't all bad. At least Ying Ying had survived and grown safely into adulthood. Exhausting as it was, he couldn't entirely complain. 1 month later, on the day of the entrance exam, ZEO Academy, established at the dawn of the new era, welcomed an influx of prospective students. Among them was Ying Ying, buzzing with excitement at the number of new enrollees, which had grown significantly from the year before. She ran toward the academy gates, and Shen trailed behind, noting that the school had been around for 4 years now, and its reputation kept improving. Suddenly, he spotted someone ahead and warned Ying Ying to be careful, but it was too late. She collided with a boy sporting yellow hair. She immediately apologized, saying she hadn't noticed him. The boy, blushing, told her it was fine and ran off at once. Watching him flee, Ying Ying sighed and remarked to Shen that was social anxiety. Laughing, Shen nudged her and declared he had no such issue. He was actually very sociable. Then he asked her to hurry inside and save him a seat because he needed to visit the restroom. Together, they entered the academy building. Inside the academy, Ying Ying headed to the entrance exam orientation hall, while Shen went to the restroom. As time passed and Shen didn't return, Ying Ying grew anxious, because Lord S's speech was about to begin, and she knew Shen would make a terrible impression if he arrived after it started. Just then, Funing stepped onto the stage and announced that the entrance exam orientation would begin in 1 minute, asking everyone to settle into their seats. Seeing Funing on stage, Ying Ying became even more worried about Shen's absence. Once Funing left the stage, Lord S appeared backstage, not late this time. Surprised to find him already there, Funing asked why he was so sweaty. Of course, Shen had run all the way after, quickly stashing his clothes in the restroom, but he couldn't reveal the truth. Laughing it off, he said maybe he was wearing too many layers. Funing grumbled that his current outfit looked fine, then handed him a mic and told him to go on stage. The crowd erupted into cheers when Lord S stepped forward. Smiling, he greeted everyone, until he spotted Ying Ying in the audience, energetically waving at him. She was brimming with excitement and secretly hoped to ask Lord S to bless Shen with good luck and maybe sign 100 autographs. Seeing her made Lord S so nervous that he forgot his prepared speech entirely. Confused by his silence, Funing wondered if he had blanked on his lines again. Left with no choice, Lord S decided to improvise. Taking a breath, he suddenly shouted, "Good luck on the exam, everyone!" For a few seconds, the entire auditorium fell silent in surprise. Funing clutched her head, bracing for the worst, but after those tense moments, a few people began clapping, and soon the entire crowd joined in, praising Lord S for being so cool, just as they'd expect from him. Funing was stunned that it actually worked out. Once the orientation ended, everyone headed to the exam hall to have their powers ranked. There, Ying Ying ran into Shen, grabbing his ear and demanding to know where he'd disappeared to. Shen lied, saying he noticed the orientation had begun and didn't want to cause a disturbance, so he waited outside. He joked that nature had called, telling her not to stay mad. Ying Ying informed him that their exam numbers were consecutive, so there was a chance they'd be assigned to the same testing room. She urged him not to hold back and to show off his 5-meter leap. As they talked, a computer voice summoned student numbers 121 and 122 to the testing platform. It was Ying and Shen. She told him to hurry. An instructor directed them to stand on the platform with their arms relaxed, looking straight ahead. The moment Ying stepped onto it, a brilliant blue light shone. After a few seconds, her result appeared on a screen. The instructor announced that she had a 3-star intermediate awakening. Overjoyed, Ying jumped around in excitement, and the instructor wished her luck on the rest of the exam. Then it was Shen's turn. He stood on the platform, but there was no reaction at all. After a few moments, the instructor told him that no awakened ability was detected. If he wasn't awakened, the instructor explained, there was some risk in continuing the exam, and it might be best for him to withdraw. Shen laughed and asked if he should just drop out, secretly hoping they would eliminate him so he wouldn't have to keep juggling his 2 lives. Before Shen could slip away, Ying grabbed his collar. She told the instructor that Shen possessed a copying ability and lacked any original power of his own, which might explain why the platform hadn't reacted. Surprised, the instructor registered Shen in the database, remarking that copying abilities were quite rare. He recalled the last student with such an ability only achieved a 3-star low-tier awakening, and wished both Shen and Ying success in the rest of the exam. Wearing a dejected expression, Shen thanked the instructor, realizing his escape plan had failed. Right after Shin and Ying, it was the turn of the same yellow-haired boy Ying had bumped into at the entrance. As the boy stepped down from his assessment, a nearby onlooker recognized him and asked his friend, "Isn't that Lee Kexin's useless little brother?" The friend confirmed it was, adding that Lee Kexin herself had only a 1-star ranking. They joked that even if the boy got in, he'd be stuck in the bottom class. They laughed about how he had a genius sister but a useless brother, saying it took some skill to be born that way. Overhearing talk about a bottom class, Shen felt curious. He didn't remember instituting anything like that. He decided he would have Funing look into it later. While he was lost in thought, Ying approached the yellow-haired boy, who was indeed named Kexin. He recognized her from their earlier collision. Ying commented that she hadn't expected him to be number 123, which likely meant they'd be in the same room. With a gloomy expression, Kexin admitted he didn't think he would pass, and if he failed, he'd only disgrace his sister. Trying to lift his spirits, Ying told him not to be so hard on himself. "So what if it's just 1 star?" she asked. "It's just a number." But Kexin shook his head, saying 1 star was the lowest tier and he had no future. He added he had never heard of a 1-star outperforming a 3-star, so maybe it was best to give up. Shen joined in and tried to encourage Kexin. He pointed out that the academy didn't accept only awakened students. If Kexin had other talents, he could apply for special admission. Shen told him not to lose hope. Ying agreed, nodding and pointing to Shen. "Look at him," she said. "He doesn't even have a single star, but he's acting like it's no big deal." Kexin was surprised to learn that Shen had a 0-star rank, which essentially meant having no awakened power. Shen smiled and explained it could still be considered an awakened ability, just a copying power. While they were talking, 3 boys approached. A blue-haired boy, Ouyang, turned to the others and said, "Isn't this Lee Kexin's little brother? Does he really need to take the test? He should just get his sister to pull some strings." Another boy laughed, adding, "Why would the Lee family's eldest daughter waste her time on a useless brother? Having him around is embarrassing. Better to cut ties sooner rather than later." The group then burst into laughter. Spurred on by Shen and Ying's encouragement, Kexin tried to stand up for himself. He asked Ouyang why they were bullying him when he hadn't provoked them at all. Before Kexin could finish, Ouyang grabbed his collar and demanded, "What did you just say?" Panicked, Kexin asked Ouyang to let him go. Suddenly, Ying stepped in and pushed Ouyang away, so forcefully that he nearly went flying. The other 2 boys caught him. Furious, Ouyang pointed at Ying, shouting, "Stupid girl! Do you have any idea who I am? How dare you shove me? 1 word from me, and you'll never set foot in this academy." Equally enraged, Ying fired back, "Who are you?" But Shen, after hearing Ouyang insult his girlfriend, couldn't stay silent. Stepping in front of Ying, Shen asked, "And who do you think you are exactly? Your last name's Ouyang, right? I think I've heard of you." Ying glanced at Shen, surprised he knew that name. Ouyang glared at him and snapped, "Who the hell are you? Think you're a hero?" He told Shen to mind his own business. Shen merely smiled and answered that he was just another ordinary student here for the exam. Ouyang smirked, saying that since they were all in the same exam room, he'd see them in the test hall. He brushed past Shen, vowing to deal with them there. As Ouyang left, Kexin worriedly told Shen and Ying that Ouyang would definitely come after them now. They didn't need to help him. Worst case, Ouyang would have just messed with Kexin but wouldn't have gone too far. An angry Ying declared she wasn't afraid, promising they'd face Ouyang in the exam. There are jerks like him everywhere, so why be scared? She asked. Still shaken, Kexin apologized for dragging them into his problem, explaining that Ouyang was a young master of the influential Ouyang family, which held a permanent seat on the academy's board. Even if they passed the exam, they'd be thorns in his side. Ying told him not to worry, that they'd deal with it when the time came. Shen then urged Kexin to come along and prepare for the exam, trying to make him feel safe. Internally, though, Shen decided he wouldn't let the Ouyang family's antics slide. Sometime later, all the students gathered in front of a large maze entrance. An instructor announced that they would have 30 minutes to complete the test, and anyone who failed to exit the maze within that time would not pass. He also mentioned that the maze contained various traps, which the students would have to navigate on their own. Finally, he told everyone to get ready, as the timer would start in 15 seconds. All the students had to enter the maze through separate doors. Before going in, Ying warned Shen not to mess up. She then wished Kexin good luck, who promised to do his best. Ouyang, eyeing Kexin, followed right after him. The moment the timer started, Shen and the others stepped into the maze. Shen initially thought he might just sit down for a while, since he could take a shortcut and exit in 5 minutes. After all, he designed this maze himself. But he dismissed the idea, curious to see how Ying would handle the traps he'd set up. Besides, escaping too quickly wouldn't match his supposed awakening level. Deciding to keep an eye on her, he sprinted toward the path leading from Ying's door. Within seconds, he spotted her wandering the maze calmly and felt a bit disappointed. She didn't seem tense at all, despite the fact that this exam wasn't exactly a cakewalk. While strolling along, Ying suddenly triggered a trap. A demon leaped from the maze wall to attack her, but she reacted instantly, dodging backward. It was a 2-star mimicry demon with enhanced strength, glaring at Ying with glowing red eyes. Undaunted, she readied her trap skill, setting it under her left foot. Mocking the demon, she said, "You little nobody. Think you can take me on?" Enraged by her provocation, the demon lunged at her, which was exactly what Ying expected. Calling it an idiot, she jumped clear just as the demon stepped onto her trap. It froze in place, completely immobilized, and Ying strode past it, explaining that strength demons were low in intelligence and easy to provoke. Engaging one head-on wasn't the best strategy. Observing her quick victory, Shen nodded in approval. She's definitely a top student, he thought. She'd obviously memorized all the basics he'd covered in the prep materials and was handling herself with ease. Shen sighed, figuring she'd undoubtedly be one of the exam's standout performers. Just then, the sound of splashing water grabbed their attention. It was a water-based ability attack from somewhere nearby. Ying immediately recognized that it came from Kexin's direction and dashed off to help him. Shen watched her go, shaking his head. "She just can't help meddling," he murmured, before following in her wake. Meanwhile, on the other side of the wall, the person being attacked by water bullets was none other than Kexin. Ouyang was unleashing continuous blasts of water on him, laughing and asking, "Where are your helpers now? Why aren't they coming to save you? With all this noise, they must have heard by now." Hoping to protect Shen and Ying, Kexin insisted that they were just passing by and had nothing to do with him. "Don't drag them into this," he pleaded. Ouyang scoffed at Kexin's claim that they were merely strangers, and retorted, "Do you think I'm stupid?" Summoning his courage, Kexin told Ouyang that his current troubles were his own fault. Kexin's sister had only punished Ouyang because he deserved it, fulfilling her duty as an enforcer. Ouyang grinned devilishly and replied, "And so what if she's an enforcer? My Ouyang family is one of the guild's shareholders. Her salary comes from our contributions. Besides," he added, "she hates you more than she hates me. You're just a disgrace to your family, an utter failure. While your sister awakened as a high-level ability user, you ended up as trash." Ouyang continued, "All the hopes people placed in you were shattered. Even though you share the same blood, you and your sister are worlds apart. You serve as a reminder to everyone that even a family with a prodigy can produce garbage." Hearing Ouyang's words, Kexin began to feel genuinely worthless. Approaching him, Ouyang prepared another water spell and sneered, "So, are you leaving on your own, or should I send you out? I don't want trash in my class." Before Ouyang could strike, Ying appeared, telling him that if he insisted on calling everyone else trash, he was the one unworthy of being her classmate. "Your so-called strength is just dumb luck from awakening better abilities," she said. "Being proud of that is idiotic." Outraged to see Ying interfering once again, Ouyang sneered, Awakening stronger abilities proves you have superior genes and inferior genes deserve to be eliminated. Undeterred, Yingying helped Kexin to his feet and called Ouyang a social Darwinist. She asked Kexin if he was all right, telling him not to worry about her exam performance. She was confident she'd pass anyway. Pointing directly at Ouyang, she added, "I don't want to share a class with cockroaches. This academy should really include a character assessment in its entrance exams. No need to let pests sneak in." At that moment, Shen arrived behind Yingying, quietly noting her comment. Meanwhile, Ouyang turned livid at being called a cockroach and hurled an obscene insult at Yingying, something too vile for the writer to repeat. Shen was incensed by Ouyang's words, but before he could intervene, a one-eyed demon suddenly appeared and lunged at him. Deciding to put on a little show, Shen struck it with a flaming fist, taking it down in a single blow. Evaluating the demon, he found it disappointingly weak and thought, "Once this year's exams end, I'll recalibrate these mimic demons." Turning back to Ouyang, Shen demanded, "What did you just call Yingying?" Amused, Ouyang snorted, "Another helper shows up? Are you all planning to gang up on me? How frightening!" Before Ouyang could finish speaking, something suddenly flashed past him. Stunned, he looked ahead to see Shen, who had been behind him just a moment ago, now standing right in front of him. Catching sight of Shen's intense gaze, Ouyang began to feel uneasy. Meanwhile, in the control room, Funing was monitoring the exam through the camera feeds. She asked the instructor to zoom in on the footage from camera 4, the one covering the area where Shen and the others were. On the screen, Shen and Ouyang faced off. Without warning, Shen darted up to Ouyang and lifted his hand to strike. Ouyang was so shocked he couldn't react in time. Shen smacked him across the face, admonishing, "Young man, watch your language and mind your manners. You need a lesson." Kexin stood by, stunned that Shen had opted to slap Ouyang rather than use any obvious awakened power. Yingying merely sighed, thinking Shen had slipped back into his old man disciplinary habits once again.